On this Wednesday night, Canada's increasing interest rate. The cost of borrowing takes a hike again.
It's stressful.
The impacts on mortgages and small businesses. The homicides of two Métis hunters.
They painted it up as if he was violent, he was an alcoholic, the same old stereotypes.
The victim's family fighting racism while fighting for justice. Defending the Donbass region.
I stay here and I fight for people's life.
The battle for Ukraine's industrial heartland. And
do you find that Mr. Depp?
The verdict is in.
Do you find that Ms. Heard,
at a salacious celebrity court case,
has proven all the elements of defamation?
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canada's central bank announced another oversized hike of its key interest rate. It's the third increase this year in an attempt to curb soaring inflation rates. The Bank of Canada raised its rate by half a percentage point to 1.5%. It's the first back-to-back half-point hike since scheduled rate announcements began more than 2 decades ago. Today, the bank is signaling Canadians should be prepared for further benchmark boosts. These consecutive aggressive rate hikes haven't been seen in more than a quarter century. And Gaviola explains how this impacts household budgets and businesses in our top story tonight.
It's stressful.
This mother of two runs her photography studio from home, taking clients when her 3-year-old is at daycare and while her newborn naps. Today's rate hike means her monthly variable rate mortgage payments are going up by more than $100 after a similar increase in April.
As a small business owner, that can hurt if I don't have a busy month.
On a $700,000 mortgage with a typical 5-year variable rate of 1.9% amortized over 25 years, monthly mortgage payments would climb from just over $2,900 to more than $3,000. That's an extra $170 a month or more than $2,000 a year. Rate hikes and the expectation of more to come have already had a cooling effect on the housing market. But the impact on small businesses has just begun. According to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, 2 out of 3 small businesses have taken on debt during the pandemic, averaging $160,000 in the past 2 years.
You add to that the supply chain issues, you add to that the labor shortages, all of that is creating a lot of financial pressure on small businesses right now.
The CFIB is calling for more support for small businesses still reeling from COVID restrictions that gave larger rivals an even bigger financial edge.
I think the impact for us longer term is it continues to put pressure on profit margins as well as with inflation.
This owner of 2 small retail shops in Windsor, Ontario, says his variable rate debt has become more expensive as the cost of the items he stocks climbs too.
We've seen some products go up by 200 or 300% from last year in terms of cost.
The central bank says it's prepared to act more forcefully to tame inflation, which is soaring close to 7%, well above the bank's 2% target. Its next interest rate decision is July 13th, and with consumer and business spending strong, unemployment at a record low, another outsized rate hike is expected. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Canada's privacy watchdogs say fast food giant Tim Hortons violated the law and misled customers by unnecessarily collecting data from users of its mobile app without their consent.
Tim's, even though it did not use the information for marketing purposes, was still collecting where its users were every few minutes of every day. That's a egregious form of surveillance.
Officials say the mobile ordering app misled users to believe the geolocation information it gathered would only be accessed when the app was in use. In reality, the company was tracking users as long as their device was on, and their data was never used for the stated purpose of advertising and promotions. Tim Hortons has agreed to delete users' data and establish a privacy management program. The Canadian government is again concerned about China's aggression toward Canada. Sources tell Global News that Chinese pilots are displaying dangerous behavior toward Canadian military crews who are in the air, and they're not stopping despite warnings from our federal government. Mercedes Stevenson explains.
I can't get him off my tail.
High-speed, high-flying fighter jet dogfights and narrowly buzzing control towers. It's the stuff of high-adrenaline action movies. though for modern militaries, more like juvenile relics of the past. But global news has learned that China is putting Royal Canadian Air Force crews in the danger zone, with high-risk, high-aggression tactics in international airspace. The Chinese military is using what sources call dangerous maneuvers to intercept Canadian intelligence aircraft, currently on a UN mission to enforce sanctions against North Korea. Fast and agile Chinese fighter jets are buzzing Canada's slower Aurora aircraft, with razor-thin margins, frequently zooming past the planes a mere 20 to 100 feet away, creating enough turbulence alone that Canadian planes could be thrown off course or risk a mid-air collision.
It would be terrifying for them to do any kind of evasive maneuver because they might trick the Chinese fighter pilot into doing something even more irresponsible and more dangerous. So the best they can do is fly along and hope that the Chinese fighter pilot doesn't make a mistake.
The Chinese pilots are so close, multiple sources told Global News, the Canadians can make eye contact with them and see the Chinese pilots flipping them the middle finger. Senior military officials are concerned it risks the safety and even the lives of Canadian crews. And this isn't a case of a single pilot hot-dogging. Sources say there have been approximately 60 intercepts since Christmas, and nearly half of those have been dangerous. The Canadian government has sent multiple official diplomatic rebukes to China, calling the maneuver unsafe and unprofessional, all to no avail.
The fact that the Chinese government is not responding to Canadian concerns seeking to rein this kind of adventurism in is also very concerning.
One source told Global News pilots and commanders carefully assess the risk before each flight takes off, but there is growing concern that the new tactics signal a new tone from China. Nithu?
Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa. Thanks, Mercedes. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Ottawa won't pursue a national decriminalization of certain drugs without putting systems and supports in place. His comments come a day after British Columbia was granted a 3-year exemption from federal drug laws. The province will decriminalize simple possession of some illicit drugs starting next year to deal with the opioid crisis.
Working with the jurisdiction that wanted to do it was priority for us. And of course, we've already heard cities like Toronto and Edmonton interested in taking this on as well. We're going to work with them and try to make sure every step of the way that as and if we move forward, it is not just a single solution, that it is a full wraparound approach like we're trying to create in BC.
This afternoon, an NDP bill to expand decriminalization across the country was voted down in the House of Commons. An Alberta father and son have been found guilty in connection to the deaths of 2 Métis hunters. Maurice Cardinal and his nephew Jacob Sansom were shot and killed more than 2 years ago while hunting northeast of Edmonton. Tonight, their family is speaking with Breanna Karstens-Smith about the racism they experienced while seeking justice for their loved ones.
Hours after guilty verdicts in the deaths of their loved ones, Sarah and Gina Sansom are still reeling after 2 weeks of testimony.
Maurice and Jake were on trial, not Anthony and Roger.
Jacob Sansom and his uncle Maurice Cardinal were shot and killed in March 2020. Tuesday, Anthony Bilodeau and his father Roger were found guilty. But the Sansoms say the justice is tainted because throughout the trial, defense lawyers tried to prove the Métis men had been drunk and aggressive.
They painted it up as if he was he was an alcoholic, the same old stereotypes they paint Indigenous peoples, as if his name, his family, who he was as a person does not exist.
How are they talking about Jake and Maurice? Like, it doesn't seem like they're talking about them because that's not who they were.
The Bilodeaus spotted a vehicle they didn't recognize near their property, chasing it down a rural road, believing the strangers were thieves. No evidence of theft was ever found. When the vehicles stopped, a fight started. Anthony testified he shot the victims in self-defense. The younger Bilodeau was found guilty of the second-degree murder of Cardinal, but the lesser charge of manslaughter in the death of Sansom.
Barish was able to convince a jury that my brother was a violent drunk. A violent drunk, even though my brother was none of those things.
Every day in our courtrooms, I ask witnesses, regardless of their background, about alcohol, because we know alcohol affects a whole bunch of issues that are important in a trial, like perception, judgment, response. We asked all witnesses that.
Still, the family believes changes are necessary right across Canada so Indigenous criminal cases are treated differently.
That's the cultural safe space practice, is educating lawyers, educating the RCMP, educating the Crown, educating even our judges to look for these things. And the jury will need to be instructed in these things.
A legacy these women will work towards now that there's been a guilty verdict. Breanna Karstens-Smith, Global News, Edmonton.
A group of Indigenous leaders met with Roman Catholic bishops in Winnipeg today to discuss reconciliation and their expectations of Pope Francis's visit to Canada next month.
3 locations were picked. The survivors had no say in that.
The pontiff has scheduled stops in Edmonton, Quebec City, and Iqaluit, but worries are growing that survivors won't be able to travel to those 3 cities during the Pope's visit at the end of July. The group asked the bishops if the papal visit could be expanded to more locations, but say so far the answer has been no. However, they are hopeful that the pontiff will say the right thing when he comes.
He has to say, I am sorry for what happened to your people and your children on behalf of the Catholic Church.
He says he believes the Catholic Church will stand in support of survivors in creating agreements on issues such as treaty implementation and the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. A jury in Virginia has sided with Pirates of the Caribbean star Johnny Depp in his defamation trial against ex-wife Amber Heard. But both Hollywood actors have been found guilty of defamation over claims of abuse before and during their brief marriage.
As against Amber Heard, we, the jury, award compensatory damages in the amount of $10 million. As against Amber Heard, we, the jury, award punitive damages in the amount of $5 million.
The jury found Heard defamed Depp in a 2018 Washington Post op-ed in which she referred to herself as a public figure representing domestic abuse. Depp was not named in the article but claimed it destroyed his reputation. However, jurors also found Depp defamed Heard through his attorney and awarded her $2 million. The weapons on Kyiv's wish list. Coming up, what the West is sending to help Ukraine fight Russia. Western allies pledged to deliver more weapons to Ukraine today, including the long-range artillery that Kyiv has been asking for.
We are mindful of the escalation risk and everything we're doing associated with this. But at the same time, Russia doesn't get a veto over what we send to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians didn't start this war, the Russians did.
The U.S. says a new $700 million support package will include training for Ukrainians on its advanced rocket systems, something that hasn't been done out of fears they would be used to fire into Russian territory. The Pentagon says it has received assurances from Ukraine that won't happen. Germany says it's also sending more weapons, including anti-aircraft missiles and radar systems. The Kremlin has called the West's latest pledge a move to directly and intentionally add fuel to the fire in Ukraine. But it comes as Russian forces continue to gain ground in eastern Donbass and inch closer to capturing another key city. Jeff Semple is in the region for us tonight.
This is the next stop on Russia's warpath. A rocket slammed into this residential street in the East Ukrainian city of Sloviansk. At least 3 people were killed. It shattered our windows and shook the building, she says. I'm planning to leave to Kyiv. Russia is closing in on this city, just 12 kilometers from the front line. Russian forces now on the cusp of capturing Luhansk and surrounding Ukrainian-held territory in Donetsk. The 2 provinces make up the Donbass, Ukraine's industrial heartland, and Russia's stated target. If Russian forces do come to Slavyansk, these trenches will be the last line of defense. Vladimir Putin has said since the beginning that he's coming to liberate Russian-speaking communities in the Donbass from what he calls a Ukrainian genocide. But what we have found talking to people here is just the opposite. Ordinary civilians who are digging trenches, taking up arms, and preparing to fight. This gym teacher is now an officer in the Civil Defense Battalion. We hope our Western partners will send weapons to help us, he says. But even if they don't, we will do everything we can to protect our home. Air raid sirens now blare almost non-stop in the neighboring city of Kramatorsk. 3/4 of its 200,000 residents have fled, but some can't. Albina Vonomarova lives alone in this mostly abandoned, blown-out apartment building. I can't move. I have no money, she says. I grew up in Russia. They're our brothers. Why would they do this? For those left behind, volunteers are providing food. Before the war, Katerina Onashenka was a lawyer.
I'm a fighter, so I stay here and I fight for people's life.
A couple of months ago, she was handing out food at this local train station. 10 minutes after she left, an explosion.
It's terrible sound.
She returned to find this. A Russian cluster bomb hit the crowded station. 59 people were killed. Onashenko took this photo of the Russian rocket, bearing the words, "For the children."
I don't know why, for what children they mean, what about, I don't know, for my children, no, I don't know.
The mayor says many here used to be pro-Russian, not anymore.
Now it's not thinkable.
He told Global News the war is at a critical crossroads.
The next 2 weeks are very important for Ukraine. It will depend for us, first of all. How long can we hold this line?
The answer could determine the fate of the Donbass, and perhaps even the war. Jeff Semple, Global News, Sloviansk.
The wrath of Agatha. Ahead, the deadly hurricane wreaking havoc on southern Mexico. In southern Mexico, 11 people are dead and dozens are missing in the wake of Hurricane Agatha. The storm triggered flooding and landslides across the state of Oaxaca. Most of the victims were swept away by rivers or buried in mudslides. Agatha made landfall Monday as a Category 2 hurricane, one of the strongest May storms ever to hit Mexico's Pacific coast. The Atlantic hurricane season begins today. Forecasters are predicting above normal activity with as many as 21 named storms. Scientists believe they found the biggest plant in the world, but it's probably not what you're picturing. Researchers discovered this underwater meadow of seagrass called Poseidon's ribbonweed. They found it in Shark Bay, a World Heritage Site in Western Australia. Initially, the meadow was thought to be a cluster of thousands of individual species, but scientists now think it's all just one genetically identical plant that's at least 4,500 years old. The grass covers more than 180 square kilometers. Next, Britain on the eve of celebration for the monarch's historic milestone. Royal fans are converging on London, where final preparations are underway for the 4-day celebration of Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee. Tonight, the royal family has unveiled a new portrait to mark her 70 years on the throne. Given the Queen's age and her condition lately, one of the big questions is how much the monarch will be seen during these events. Our Donna Friesen is in London on the eve of the Jubilee. Donna?
Neither, it's probably safe to say no 96-year-old has ever had a birthday celebration like this. Queen Elizabeth has ruled longer than any British monarch, and plans are in place to celebrate her 70-year reign in style over an extended holiday weekend here. From tourist hotspots to Buckingham Palace, the stage is set to celebrate a royal milestone, and the Queen's superfans are prepared to camp out all night to get a front row seat.
She deserves this. She deserves us to celebrate what a wonderful 70 years she's given to us. This celebration is our thank you to her.
It was 70 years ago that Queen Elizabeth ascended to the throne after her father died. Now the final rehearsals are over, led by her grandson, Prince William, to mark a lifetime of service.
They didn't used to have platinum jubilees, quite simply because monarchs didn't live this long.
Katie Nicholl is a journalist and author of The New Royals.
And I think what we've seen during the Queen's reign is that unstinting devotion to duty.
Mobility issues, according to the palace, means she's cut back on public events, but this is a job for life. We are expecting to see the Queen on the balcony with some members of her family. Do you think we'll see much more of her?
I'm told by Buckingham Palace that it really is going to be a case of decisions being made on the day.
What's certain is there will be no repeat of this. Only working royals will appear on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, not Prince Andrew and not Harry and Meghan, though they are here for the weekend. Do you think there will be family drama with their visit?
Well, I can tell you that the instruction from the very top, and that is HMQ, is that no family dramas or tensions are to overshadow any part of this Jubilee.
She has devoted supporters who love her and who know this moment is likely not going to be repeated.
Look, there's no doubt that a monarch that reigns that long, pretty successfully, and has that much affection, a bond with her subjects here and around the world is an almost impossible act to follow. But I think this is a moment for people to take stock of what she's achieved and say thank you.
Not everyone, of course, will be celebrating. There are critics who say this is just a display of colonial nostalgia. Yet there are people who can separate their fondness and affection for the Queen from their feelings about the institution of the monarchy itself. And tens of thousands of people are expected to line the route for her birthday parade tomorrow. Neetu?
Thanks, Donna. And you can join Donna tomorrow when she'll bring you Global National from London. But that's Global National for this Wednesday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is the springtime shot of the downtown Edmonton skyline and the Walter Dale Bridge. Thanks for watching and have a great night.